Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and welcome. My name is Greg Jane. I'm the editorial page editor at the Columbian. And we are pleased to welcome candidates for State Senate from the 18th Legislative District. To start with, I think we'll let the editorial board members introduce themselves, so go right ahead.
Hi, Brad. I'm the editor of the Columbian.
Scott Campbell, former publisher of the Columbian and still on the editorial board.
Jody Campbell, editorial board. Thanks for joining us today.
You want to introduce yourself?
Kelly, you're mute, John.
You're on mute.
There we go. I'm Callie. I'm the state politics reporter for the Columbian, and I will be reporting on this meeting, but I won't be participating in it, which is good because I think I'm the sound offender in the background here.
Okay. Okay, then we'll go to the candidates. Why don't you introduce yourselves and take about 1 minute, explain why you are running for this position, and we'll start with Rick.
Hi, I'm Rick Bell, Democrat. I'm also a small business owner, and I've been working in healthcare technology for 20 years. 4 years ago, I launched my own startup and consulting business where I specialize in healthcare information technology. In addition to running my business, I recently completed a healthcare MBA at OHSU, and I studied the economics of healthcare and also how to improve quality in healthcare so that it improves for seniors, working class folks, Black and brown folks, the homeless, et cetera. My main issues are healthcare and housing and education. And so my basic commitment is that over the course of my term, healthcare costs and housing costs will be lower. Otherwise, I'm accountable for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anne, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm State Senator Ann Rivers, and I have been serving the people of the legislative district for 2 years as a state representative and 2 terms as a state senator. I think that we are in times that have really called us to step up and to be strong in our leadership. And because I was able to be a part of the team that pulled us out of the Great Recession, I'd like to take the knowledge and relationships that I built during that time to help lead us out of this economic downtime. I still best represent the views and values of the people of the 18th Legislative District. Thank you.
Thanks. And just to get a timeline, so when were you first elected to the Senate?
My first election was in 2010. To the Senate 2012.
Okay, thank you. John, go ahead.
Hi, folks. I'm John Lee. I'm delighted to offer the citizens of the 18th Legislative District a true conservative option in their choice for their representative. I'm a retired airline pilot. I initially served 11 and a half years in the military and the Air Force. I just retired after 31 years working for a major U.S. airline. For the last decade or so, I've been a citizen advocate fighting for transparency and conservative spending of their money. An awful lot of the people know my battles with fighting the failed Columbia River crossing process. I was one of the first people to get involved in fighting the outrageous scheme Oregon has to toll our roads that are already paid for. And at the end of the day, people want transparency and accountability for their money. Anybody that's curious can go to electjohnlee.com to learn more, because Lee is the key for better, more responsible governance at your state legislature.
Oh, thank you. It didn't take us long to get the campaign slogans, so we appreciate that, John. Anyway, let's start out. Obviously, these are difficult times. It's going to be difficult for the legislature whenever they get back to session. What approach should the legislature take regarding budgeting and the expected budget shortfall? And do you think that there should be a special session anytime soon? We'll start with Ann.
Absolutely. We've been calling for a special session since May, I think. The governor has gotten significant dollars in from the federal government, and right now it's all discretionary. He's not relying on the legislature in any way, shape, or form to make budgetary decisions. Why this is important is he's decided to cut very important things like FMAP, which is the federal Medicaid matching program that currently is used by our long-term care facilities to pay for things like PPE and additional people to help make sure that the long-term care facilities are clean. So the fact of the matter is that in this COVID time, the money's supposed to be spent protecting the most vulnerable among us from COVID, and actually it's been yanked away. Additionally, our foster kids have been left out in the cold. But, you know, this is one reason I loved working with Governor Gregoire, is that she would make hard decisions because they were the right decisions. And this governor simply is not making tough decisions. It's really our misfortune that this happened during a campaign year, which tends to impact the ability of someone to make hard decisions that could impact the bottom line.
Now, talking about hard decisions, Ann, do you foresee, will the focus be more on cutting spending, or will there be a need to raise additional revenue?
We can do it with cutting spending. If we took the action that Governor Gregoire took, where she declared an economic crisis and said we have to put off the increases to state employee pay, then we can get ourselves out of this. We subsequently made up all of those cuts. They weren't cuts, they just held back on the proposed pay increase until we got out of the rough waters, and then we made all of that up. You know, we talk about shared sacrifice, but the reality is that the governor in the last budget also put in $100 million for a climate contingency fund, which is great. And there are people who will really like that. But when it came down to making cuts, he cut only 50% of that. That additional $50 million could go a long way in helping out our foster kids and other necessary programs. So I think it's a combination of things. I don't support the proposed income tax. I don't support the proposed capital gains income tax, or in the Joe Wen plan, the increase in sales tax, B&O tax. There were like 4 other taxes that is part of the plan. Those are as regressive as every other tax. And so why would we do that on people who are really struggling in this down economy because of COVID?
Okay, thank you. John, do you foresee focus on spending cuts or additional revenue, or both?
Let's look at the reality that our citizens are facing. And record numbers of our Washington citizens are unemployed, zero income, in part because of the incompetence of the Inslee administration in being able to get unemployment checks to our citizens. The Nigerian scam stole roughly $650 million of our people's money. That's an outrage. So the people are looking at no income in some instances. Supposedly well over 10,000 people are still waiting to get their very first unemployment check from the incompetence of this administration. We absolutely need a legislative session to hold the governor and the bureaucrats in Olympia responsible for what is and isn't happening. In terms of the entire budget, you're looking at an $8 to $9 billion shortfall. There is no way you can raise that much in taxes on people who aren't working. What does the average citizen do? What's the income coming in? And then they adjust their budget to spend only for the absolute vital necessity.
So should we cut $9 billion?
So the projected shortfall is between 8 and 9 billion, and that's as of roughly a month ago. Who knows what the revenues are or aren't in the last month? You only spend what you take in at best. That's where we need to be, and that's what we need to be fighting for. Our citizens are suffering.
So we need to cut
unbelievable.
We need to cut $9 billion over the next 3-year budget.
Absolutely, we need to cut whatever.
No, correct. We have over $3 billion in our rainy day fund. So we will be using some of that, which diminishes the amount of the revenue that's really necessary. Additionally, what we've seen is that people stayed at home, and so the sales tax actually increased. So because people weren't going to Oregon shopping. So
okay, just like, let's let John finish. Ann.
all right.
Go ahead, John. So should that entirely be cuts? It should be 8 to 9 billion in cuts from state spending.
Hey, we've got to live within our means, and that's what the citizens do in their own lives. That's what they demand, I believe. And bottom line is, I would never spend my entire rainy day fund or my life savings all in one shot.
So, so the state budget should be cut $8 to $9 billion between now and 2023.
So let's look at
it's
what
a yes
the
or no
reality is. No, you'd say it's a yes or no answer, my friend. I don't think so. No, we don't need to cut it all, but clearly you have to have an understanding of what the revenues are, and you never spend more than the revenues that are coming in. It's what average citizens do every single day. You don't spend more than you have.
None of that would be tax increases.
They're absolutely not. The people cannot afford tax increases.
Okay, Rick, how would you approach the budget crisis?
Well, clearly it's going to be a contentious year in Olympia next year. And so, look, my fundamental approach is to put people first. And so that if we recklessly cut into social services and programs that help people, that can have lasting and deeper social impacts that may be more costly in the long run either way. I think, so I'm an entrepreneur. I work a small business. I have to innovate all the time. I have to innovate every day. I have to do more with less money in order to survive. And so fundamentally, I would bring that perspective to Olympia and think like an entrepreneur, think like an innovator. You have to do more with less. And so I think, this may sound like a Republican, but we need to look at regulations. Are there regulations that we can improve that can make government processes more efficient, can help more? Because when times are good, it's easy to focus on the good times, but when times are bad, we need to look at everything, and we need to look at making sure that all of our government services run more efficiently, and that where there are opportunities to do more with less resources, we encourage the innovation, encourage taking new approaches to ideas that use our resources more wisely and more efficiently. That all said, I know that there's going to be tough choices that we have to make. But fundamentally, I would always put people first and look for a third way.
Would you probably support a tax increase of any sort?
I think when you deal with taxes, we got to put everything on the table, because whenever you put up one tax or another, there's somebody who hates that tax, and you can promise them cutting it. So when we look at this, we have to look at this in a comprehensive way. But in the end, I would favor taxes on corporations and big businesses over working class families.
Okay. Thank you. Craig? You want to ask something?
Sorry about that. You caught me while I was writing a note here. So the latest thing that we're hearing about is defund the police, and I realize that means different things to different people. But what does that mean to you, and what do you go along with that notion? If not, why not? So let's start with Rick, I guess.
Sure. I think the defund the police is a bad approach to messaging, but I think when you ask the folks in the groups that have been protesting, if you ask them to elaborate more deeply, you get to the deeper, more respectable ideas. I mean, I think one way, if I were to re-message that, I would say something like rethink the police or reimagine the police. And I think the fundamental idea is that we can't dump all of the world's problems on the cops. And so there are new ideas that new approaches that we can take, where we can augment the cops with folks who are better equipped to deal with mental health, better equipped to deal with domestic disputes. Policing can't be done by angels. Policing is done by ordinary human beings with all the flaws and all the biases that exist there. But so from the perspective of the state legislature, I would look at legislation like HB 2789, which is where the comprehensive data collection on police violence. I think that's what something like close to what it's called. But the fundamental idea is to take sort of a public health approach to policing and police violence, where we gather the data, we look at disparities and outlier behavior, and then we look at the root causes of that phenomena. Then we look at sort of solutions that can address those root causes. And for those solutions that we pilot out in the real world and that are successful, we look to scale those up at the state level. So I think the real approach to solving the problem of policing is through data.
And what's your take on that?
So I agree. In fact, Rick and I agreed a lot on this the other night. First of all, we have to have the data in order to make a sound decision. I've not spoken with one human being who thought that what happened with George Floyd was in any way acceptable. But I think that we need, rather than defunding the police, I think we need a parallel bucket. And that money has to go to help the police to do the community policing kind of things, that where relationship development happens, where it's not an us versus them mentality. And I'm thinking of if you've seen the basketballcop.com, which is really kind of a cool thing where there's relationship development, and then there's not this us versus them sort of mentality. We all need a strong police force. We all need a healthy relationship or a healthy perception of our police force. And I'll tell you another thing, our police officers want that too. So whatever we can do to facilitate that community policing model where people have some familiarity with the folks that they're working with, I think that only benefits all of us. None of us benefit from an environment where there's no respect, no trust for police officers, for law enforcement as a whole.
John, what's your take? Thank you, Ann.
So I don't know of a single citizen in the 18th district that wants a situation where they call 911 and there are no police there to respond to their needs or concerns. I think every citizen wants and expects to be safe in their home and in their community. We need proper police training first and foremost, and that takes funding. Community policing needs to start in the schools. I love the concept of having our police officers interacting with the children in the schools, because it is relationships, the children learning that they can trust their police officers, and the police officers then create a relationship with the children so that they can respond to their needs. Having policing in the community, again, people learn the relationships with the police learn the concerns of the citizens that they are there to defend. And at the end of the day, it's about relationships and trusting. At the end, we never want to defund the police. If we alienate our police officers and cause them to be hesitant in protecting us, it's all over. It's a sad state of affairs. We absolutely need the best possible training, and we need to ensure our police get it, and we need to build the relationships so that the people trust the police and the police trust the people.
So you would actually see some expansions then, so more police in schools, more training. So where would you get the money for that?
Hey, where it is, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy that needs to be defunded in our state bureaucracy. But at the end of the day, public safety is job number one for our government.
Okay, public safety, not public education?
Well, there's some problems with that, guys, too. Like in Clark County, I think in Vancouver public schools, there's disparate discipline going to Black and Indigenous kids, and what's the root cause of that? And then I think if you couple that with cops in the schools, are we getting those kids roughed up? Are we giving them a glide path into the school to prison pipeline? I mean, those are a lot of potential problems with that, too, that I think we should take a serious look at.
Okay. John, any thoughts on that?
Hey, I believe our police officers are overwhelmingly lawful, responsible citizens. They care about the people they are there to defend. And it is those relationships. Our teachers build relationships with the children so that the children learn to trust their teachers. Having the police in the schools so that the children learn they can trust the police officers is a great thing, because the teachers and the police officers can work together to deliver the proper attitudes for the safety of the children, and that's what the parents want.
Thank you.
Good, Craig. Let me just play off that because talking about police and schools, and this is a different question, but it came to mind. Would you favor having guns in schools, allowing teachers to be armed in schools? And let's just make this quick, and then we can move on. John?
I think that's most appropriately a law enforcement question. And the law enforcement officers can bring their guns to school. They are trained. They are best prepared that. And then I think that's a local decision. Local school boards, local parents ought to make that decision. And if they believe they want it, there's some amazing training programs that the school board and the local parents can propose. And if they want to fund it, that's great. If they want to come to the legislature and ask for help funding that, I'm happy to step up to represent what the people want for that. You know, right now, over 40% of the money we spend in the state budget on K-12 education does not go into the classroom. We can find money if the local schools want that part of their community policing and for the safety of their children. By all means, I'll work with law enforcement all day long to deliver what the families want.
And really quick, guns in schools?
I think it's a local decision. I know that there's a school in Yakima who's been doing this with a lot of success, but I do think that it's a local decision that reflects the views and the values of the people of each school district.
Rick?
I'm not in favor of that, and I'm skeptical. I think whenever you introduce guns into the mix, people get hurt. I'm willing to have that debate and look at the data, what we have and what we would define as success. But no, that's not my bag.
Okay. Great, thanks. Let's see. In the past year, we've made a little bit of progress towards replacing the I-5 bridge. What are your thoughts on that? What should be the approach? Would you focus on I-5 first or a third bridge first? We'll start with Rick.
I'm trying to, well, look, for transportation issues, we need to move forward with updating the bridge, and the impact that's going to happen is going to be problematic for a lot of people. The transportation issues, I think that let's take a step back and see, why haven't we done anything since 2013? You know, whatever we do here is going to be difficult and it's going to impact folks, but in the long run, we have to get through it. We have to improve our infrastructure. So I think if I were to go to the legislature, I would want to take a fresh look at what the best approaches are. It seems like in the past, reports have come out that between Oregon and Washington, we don't play nice together. I wouldn't take that approach. I think we have to move forward to improve our infrastructure. People are sitting in commutes, coming to go home. And there's nobody who benefits from that. I'd like to wonder, who benefits from us not having improved infrastructure? So, no, I'm full speed ahead. We have to move forward in improving.
So you said improving, Rick. Do you mean actually replacing or just improving what we already have?
So I think we need additional bridges. I'm trying to see what the case would be against that. But, you could have a bridge that goes from the north out to the west of Portland. You have another bridge on the other side. I've looked at this a little bit, and I don't see strong reasons why haven't we moved forward. What have we done in the last 8 years? Who has benefited from us doing nothing, it looks like. So immediately in the short term, we have to deal with I-5, but looking forward, we have to have additional bridges as far as I can see. But I'm open to seeing what the reasons are against that.
But so but you still didn't answer that question.
Yeah, the upgrade that's going forward now, yeah, we should pursue that going forward.
So upgrade or just should we replace it?
I think the least impactful right now is to do the upgrade. It seems like that's the least lift, the least difficulty and pushback on doing that. So I'd say we go forward that way, but I think we need to look at the broader picture of what we should do as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jody. And why don't Oregon and Washington play nice?
Actually, we've been playing really well. In fact, we have a JLAC meeting tomorrow to have further discussion about and be updated on the work that the DOTs are doing together in terms of seeing what permitting still applies so that we don't lose all of the money that we invested the last time. So I feel like we've done a lot of relationship work. And, to Rick's point, I agree. It looks like not much has been happening, but here's what has happened. It's a little bit like watching a house go up. Anyone who's ever built a house knows that while the wiring's getting done, it looks like nothing's happening because you can't really see it. So what I would say is that we've spent some time doing, setting the table, talking about what we as a Southwest Washington delegation are hoping for, and then to reach out to Oregon and do that relationship development. That's gone along really well and in a very nonpartisan sort of way, which is, I think, what everyone would hope for and expect of us. But I think that one of the most important things that we did in the legislation that we passed a few years ago was that we said we need to institute a bi-state authority to look at multiple crossings. And there's not a conversation that's happening with Carly here in our Southwest office where we're not talking about where else can we go. Unfortunately, the West Side bypass that would take us to the under Cornelius Pass was shut down because of the labeling of the landing area as being environmentally sensitive by Oregon. So they basically said, yeah, that's off limits to you. However, there are still other opportunities between St. Helens and Woodland, which would help to disperse traffic. And then here's another interesting thought. I noticed this during COVID. I think COVID gave us an opportunity to see how much work can we really get done from home by Zoom or Teams or whatever. We saw a significant reduction of traffic on the road. So I think that as our comfort level has increased, the good news for us is we're going to see probably maybe as much as 25% of our people not getting on the road and actually, working from home, which is a bonus for us. And I think that that will alleviate some of the concerns that Rick has about the problems with construction. I think that it may be rocky for a while, but as we see reduced traffic, it may make it a little bit easier on the rest of the folks who have to commute.
Now,
things are moving along, and I mean, look, a lot of people think that there was some big dancing and joy on my part when the last project stopped, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it was me who called everyone back together starting in 2013. And it was a rough road to get everyone back in the same room, but I never gave up because I still think that it is an issue that needs to be addressed. I just want to make sure that as we move forward, it's a project that really benefits both states and that the feds actually step up and pay for the structure itself. Oregon can handle the stuff on Oregon's side, we'll handle the stuff on our side, and we'll move forward in that direction.
Now, you were instrumental in opposing the Columbia River crossing proposal in 2013. What needs to be different this time for you to support it?
I think what needs to be different is that it can't be a Christmas tree project. We can't have a new office building for TriMet down at the southern end of 99 tacked on. We can't have the retrofit of the Broadway. In fact, the retrofit's now complete and we're not paying for it. So there were so many things that were in that project that were just, here, just throw it in, just throw it in. And then the equity between the two states one of the senators said, what do I care? We're going to be charging it all back to your people when they pay tolls anyway. And that just didn't seem fair to me. So what I'm looking for is a fair project that really addresses the needs that we have in terms of, congestion reduction, all of that. But Greg, I want to make one more point, if you'll allow me.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is that part of what was happening is the communication. It was like a different story every week. And in talking with my colleagues in Oregon, they were hearing one thing, I was hearing another. And so I just want for everyone to have the same information and to be working off the same sheet of music. We need more commute time reduction than 1 minute if we're going to do this whole project. And let's be honest about it. Let's say what our goals really are. If your goal is not about congestion reduction, then let's say that. Let's say it's about whatever it is. If it's safety, let's say that. Let's have that honest discussion. But I think that we, to prevent a repeat, we all have to be singing off the same sheet of music with the same paper, and we'll get there.
Yeah, and just really quick, you mentioned it would need federal financial help for the bridge itself. What if that doesn't come?
Well, I'd like to see the Fed step up. It is a highway. It's a highway of both military significance and a highway of.
Just the question is, what if they don't?
So I don't think that we approach the military about helping us fund it. So that's a different approach than we took last time. Last time we took the FTA approach, the Federal Transit Authority approach. I'd like to see us take a different approach. If they don't step up, then I think it has to be equally split between Oregon and Washington.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to move on. John, thoughts on the bridge?
So it's been an amazing discussion. First and foremost, I know, and the people know, an Oregon State Supreme Court justice ruled that the CRC was nothing more than a light rail project in search of a bridge. It was an outrageous boondoggle. Our local favorite forensic accountant, Tiffany Couch, exposed the reality that the $3.5 billion boondoggle, the bridge itself was only $791 million. There was absolutely no need for tolls, no need for all the other waste, fraud, and abuse that was dumped into that pork barrel project.
Okay, but let's look forward.
$900 million would have paid for the bridge with no tolls, with nothing in that. So the reality is spending $900 million or $791 million was only going to deliver a 1 minute improvement in the morning southbound commute.
Okay,
That's
but we're going forward.
So going forward, doing anything other than maybe improving the seismic issues on the bridge is an absolute waste, because I don't care how big you build the funnel, at the top of it, I-5 chokes down to 2 lanes at the Rose Quarter. Oregon is about to spend $795 million, and they're going to add 0 new through lanes at the Rose Quarter. You're still going to have the choke point. That is absolutely the problem with the whole system. And unless Oregon wants to add lanes through the Rose Quarter, then you're going to deliver nothing in terms of improving the commute times. That's what the citizens want. And it's incredible to me that Senator Rivers has flip-flopped on the issue, now talking about relationships. Oregon does not respect the people in Southwest Washington who not only need but demand improved commute times. I've been to all of those tolling policy advisory committee meetings. They're just looking for excuses to pick the pockets of our citizens. I've been to the Oregon Transportation Commission. I've been to those meetings of the bi-state legislative committee that she sits on, and I haven't heard a thing about what she just shared with voters here today. We need people demanding more than a 1 minute improvement. What's the minimum commute time improvement that the citizens demand and that she will fight for? Otherwise, she says no. 1 minute's not it. What's the minimum height to clear the river? We haven't heard anything. Nobody is giving specific direction to the ODOT or the WashDOT directors that are running this. And right now, under the guise of COVID, The bureaucracy's running amok. We don't know a thing about what they are or aren't doing with their money. Finally, let's talk about this process.
Okay, so wait. If Oregon doesn't respect the people over here, then should we even try to engage? So are you saying the entire relationship is dead?
I don't want to spend the people's money. Bottom line, unless we fix problems. And I think that's where 90% of the people fall. Let's fix problems. Oregonians, the number one problem for the people in Portland is traffic congestion release. The PEMCO survey a year and a half ago.
So we shouldn't, so Washington shouldn't even deal with it.
95% of the people want traffic congestion relief. Let's give the people what they want. And if Portland doesn't want to dump their people into the core of downtown Portland, let's honor their people's request and build bypasses so that people don't have to deal with Oregon. You know, and what a huge waste for the citizens in Oregon. $795 million to create.
So should we even engage with Oregon?
Sure, I'll talk all they want. Talk is cheap, as we've discovered from so many incumbent politicians. What the people want is their problem solved. The people absolutely want their traffic congestion problem solved. And that means more bridges. Portland has a dozen bridges across the Willamette River. We need more than 2 bridges across the Columbia River. Our own Regional Transportation Council in 2008 identified the need for 4 new bridges, and they gave 2 options. I'll support any and all of those options. And if we can get more than 1 additional bridge, if we can get more than 2 additional bridges, I'll fight for it every day of the week. And we can do it responsibly instead of wasting our existing transportation.
Has there been any interest from the Oregon side on a 3rd or 4th bridge?
There are people over there talking about it. We had a letter written by the mayors of Troutdale, Fairview, and Wood Village saying they would absolutely love an East County bridge connecting from the Camas-Washougal area over to the Troutdale, Wood Village, Fairview area. They signed on board. They put their names on the line. That's a community that realizes they need traffic congestion relief. And I very strongly suspect Boeing plant in Gresham would love an alternate way to get their parts, their raw materials, their finished products out of Gresham rather than having to fight the nightmare of the Glen Jackson Bridge and the I-84, I-205 interchange.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. Let's see. Quick question. Do you believe that climate change is real? Is it exacerbated by human activity? And what should the legislature do about it? Start with Ann.
So, can you hear me? So, I think our biggest challenge with climate change is that we're already one of the lowest CO2 emitting states in the union, and yet somehow there's this perception that we're not. So what I would recommend we do, Greg, is we quantify what do we want our reduction to be. And once we have that data-driven information, we can make data-driven decisions. So for example, we can do things like plant the public right-of-ways with trees that can become immediate carbon sinks. By doing this, we're also doing some job creation, which I don't think really hurts. But also, we can stop ordering things from other parts of the United States. So we don't have truck traffic that's driving from Florida to bring goods to Washington and further creating a bigger CO2 emission problem. There are lots of things that we can do that are not a carbon tax, that are not a low carbon fuel standard, that just make sense if what we really want to do is we want to reduce our CO2 emissions, and candidly won't harm our economy. So I think that it's a fine discussion to have, but I don't know why we always have to jump to high tax options in order to get the job done. We know that old growth trees are not carbon sinks. We know that they've taken as much CO2 as they're going to take. Why don't we selectively harvest and replant new trees, which will then capture more CO2. And then also we can at that point stop some of the forest fire issue by having young saplings and young trees. Because when an old growth forest burns, it emits a ton. It releases all the CO2 it's been capturing, right? So I think it could also be a revenue source. You'll know that our public schools are also funded by revenue from timber harvest. And so that could be another benefit. I just think we have to stop looking at this either or. We have to do this to save the environment. When there are so many things that we could do, we could also incentivize businesses and increase the depreciation rate on energy efficient machinery so that they're not.
And I'm going to stop you there and move on. Okay, John, your thoughts?
So I love touting the reality that Washington State is the gold standard. We are the leader. We are the cleanest or the next to cleanest state in the nation. We should be the example the entire world follows when it comes to not only CO2 emissions, but treating our environment. And if the rest of the world followed us, it'd be a whole lot better.
Can we get better though? Is there no room for improvement?
There is always room for improvement, Greg. But the point is, when China and India are dumping boatloads of pollution, what we do is not going to matter. We need to enforce current law, and that's not happening in so many aspects of our state bureaucracy. I've been an aggressive proponent of cleaning up and enforcing current law. I've told the story here in our local community, Lacamas Lake. Everybody's kicking the football. It's polluted, it's toxic. We even had a pet die in it, and nobody wants to take responsibility for enforcing current law. Why is that? That's one of our problems. We don't need new laws. We just need to enforce current laws. In a macro sense, Washington State is the gold standard. If the world followed our lead, we would be a lot better off. And in the minimal point is we need to enforce current law. And if we would do that better, then it would still be cleaner and we would be cleaning up today.
Okay, thanks. Rick?
It's interesting the generational differences, I think, that people had in terms of the stakes for climate change, right? The climate that Ann and John grew up with is lost. Like the world will be a different place from a couple decades ago versus a couple decades forward. It's a different world. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and what I see what is in store for her generation, it makes me sad because this is a slow moving train wreck. It's the sense of some big trains take a mile to stop, and the fatal flaw is if you start pulling the brake at a quarter mile out, you're just going to slowly watch the destruction. So sorry if I'm a downer about climate, because I think what's in store for us as a species is really bad. And I think that the older generations, they don't have the same stakes in it that the younger generations do. But that's all the reason for younger folks that they need to mobilize in order to get solutions that are going to be beneficial to them in place. But simply put, yes, there's an entire economy out there in dealing with climate. There's a whole slew of jobs that can't be outsourced, that are location based. And the challenge of climate change, it spurs us to do the right things for government. We need to fix our infrastructure. We need bridges. We need rapid transit. We need more light rail. We need to have those solutions in place. We need to deal with our food issues. There's actually a lot of carbon issues generated around food production, especially with beef. We need to be better stewards of the land, the water, the air. All of these things are closely knit together. There are solutions for climate with the soil. So there's carbon that we can sequester into the soil. There's efforts we need to make with cleaning up pollution, and also especially managing our energy grid and our entire energy ecosystem. All of those things are just the right things for government to do, and they can tackle this challenge. It's out in the distance enough that we as a human species, we only respond to immediate threats. But this is an abstract threat, but it's a deeper and more dangerous threat than our species has ever really faced before. So whatever we do here, there's the right things to do are well known. But what we do here, we can use as a model to export that out to other states. And I see a generational gap there. And this is where I would plead with millennials and younger folks. This is your fight. You got to come bring it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
I had a quick one. I know that John's totally against tolling. I wondered about Ann and Rick.
So I think that tolls are a bedrock conservative value. I think if you, and Jody, you might remember our discussions from the last go around, that if you have to leave people a way to go that's toll free. On the last go round, we told the 205 bridge and we told the I-5 bridge, and the plan was to do pre-tolling. But I think that the existing number of lanes today that are on the I-5 bridge should not be tolled, and the new lanes should be tolled. At that point, it becomes a convenience fee. So if I think that we're going to be seeing a bridge with more lanes than the last time. I think that we have to work to keep the 205 untolled so that people have a way to go. But it's just like people who want to have park fees. They want to say, get rid of the park fees. And I say, you know what? I don't use the parks. I don't want people taking money from the general fund to pay for something I don't use. It's the same kind of a thing. It's a user's fee. Don't use the tolled lanes if you don't want to pay a toll.
Okay, thanks. Rick?
I hate paying tolls. I mean, that's just my personal annoyance with it. I would prefer to not have tolls. But I think in general, I think that can be a cost-effective way to manage traffic. And there's a lot of good things to have smart tolling. What I don't like about it, though, is that it becomes kind of a set price, especially when you make the conveniences of you have the little sticker or you have the thing that automatically pays the toll for you. Then that just becomes a baked-in tax. And then it seems like it's difficult to have oversight. Are those funds really going to maintain the roads, or effectively those funds are being applied effectively? So I don't know, maybe I'm just expressing my personal dislike, but no, I would be skeptical of putting tolls on the roads.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, if I jump back in and just clarify something there.
Sure.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for acknowledging me as the leader in the battle against tolls. And at the end of the day, you are picking the pockets of the average citizen that uses roads that are presently paid for, first and foremost. Number two is the reality that in Seattle 2 years ago, 43% of the money that collected in tolls went to the cost of collection. Scott and Jody, you're business owners. Would you ever accept a credit card that charged you 43% of the revenue coming in to cover the cost of collecting the money? It's outrageous. No business can run under that manner. The simple reality is the gas tax costs less than 1% as a cost of collection. So if you're going to take money from the people, you need to do it in the most cost-effective manner possible. And tolling is outrageous, and it's a huge waste of money, and it puts that money into those rich companies back east that make all the money on those tolls instead of actually solving the transportation problems here. And that's what the people want. They want their transportation solved in a cost-effective manner, and tolling is not it.
Thank you.
So Greg, just to be clear, no one likes tolls. No one likes tolls. I think, Jody, you hit the nail on the head. There's no magic pot of money coming from the feds. And gas tax. Why wouldn't we spread it out over the entire state? But when we've got one individual on this call who said over and over, no gas tax, no gas tax. And yet now we're going to be relying on a gas tax for not just this bridge, but every other bridge that we're able to get built over the Columbia. I just think is at best duplicitous. And I think it's really misleading.
Okay, that's thanks, Ann. We're going to move on. Give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and if you would like to mention any notable endorsements. And we'll start with Rick.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having this forum. It's been a spirited discussion. I love it. So next year in Olympia, it will be a challenging year. We've got to deal. I don't think we know fully what the budget shortfalls are going to be. We don't know if the feds are going to come through for us and help state and local governments. It all remains to be seen. But I know that there's going to be a fight, and that I know where my priorities are, that I will always put people first. I know that the Federal Reserve has capitalized the banks with $4 trillion. So big businesses can take out loans, can get through these tough times. They'll be fine. I think we need to worry about people. We need to make sure that people are taken care of. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a capitalist. I'm a small business owner and an innovator, and I have to innovate every day. I have to do more with less in order to survive. I do that 5 days a week. I can bring that skill set to the legislature. I can think of and help work on creative solutions that think outside the box, and make sure that our resources are spent effectively and wisely so that we do the most good for all. I've gotten endorsed Washington Stonewall Democrats, retired Public Employees Council, Clark County Democrats, 18th LD Democrats, and more are on the way, I hope. So check out my website at citizenbell.com, and I'm available on email. I even got my phone number published. All of that stuff is available. I'm ready to interact and collaborate. Be on the trail.
Thank you very much. Ann?
Thanks, Greg. You know, we are in very difficult times. We are facing the single worst economic crisis that our state has ever faced. And there are many among us who want to throw their fist in the air and shake it in rage. And you know what? Totally a normal reaction, and we all have felt that. But the reality is that is not going to solve the problems that we face. The relationships that I've developed in Olympia, the relationships that I have, the understanding and the knowledge of the ins and outs of how to get things accomplished, and my willingness to roll up my sleeves and get to work to apply all of that make me the best choice for the 18th Legislative District. My website is annrivers.com. My personal cell phone is everywhere, but in case you need it, it's 360-450-7994. And I'm happy to talk with anyone who calls. I've had nearly 70 town halls because I'm not afraid to make tough decisions, and I'm not afraid to defend those decisions. And I always keep my constituents front of mind as I do. Part of that is making sure that I stand in front of them to ask their thoughts, what's on their hearts and minds, what should I carry with me in my decision making, and then to defend the decisions that I make. I have done that for as long as I've been elected, and I have no intention of stopping that now. I best represent the views and values of the majority of the people for the 18th district.
Great, thank you. And John?
I'm only looking for one endorsement in this campaign, and that is the voters of the 18th Legislative District. The citizens believe they're tired of broken promises. They're tired of being told one thing and then the reality coming some other way. At the end of the day, sometimes some politicians stay too long, and it's time for a change. And that's what I'm hearing over and over again from the voters in the 18th district. I'm willing to go fight for the reduction in our local property taxes that we were promised as part of the McCleary solution. I want to fight for the people and transportation and cost-effective transportation solutions. I want to fight for the concept of honesty and transparency in representative government, because at the beginning and the end of the day, we are here to represent the people who elect us, and I am for that. Ley is the key for more honest, open, and transparent representation for the citizens of the 18th district.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for joining us.